Hello, I'm going to show you how I created the Ghost Swirl for the Soap Challenge Club. To start with, I added my mica, which was the solar yellow from Soak Rochford, to my warmed and melted oils. I mixed this into my fragrance oil, which in this case was from Just a Soap, JAS, the Rhubarb and Custard fragrance oil, which worked beautifully. For this month's soap challenge, we had to either go for no colour at all or have one colour which we were allowed to mix into the oil before any lye or anything else was added. So I mixed all my colour and my fragrance into the warmed oils here. No lye was added at this point. As you can see, the yellow came out really beautifully in the oils, and I was really hoping that it would come out in a relatively similar shade once it was in the finished soap. Once my oils, my mica and my fragrance oil were mixed nicely, I divided my batch. I went for 3/4 for the main part of the soap and for 1/4 for the drop swirl. Here I am pouring the 1/4 of oil, fragrance and mica mix into my one jug, and the remainder is a 3/4 mix for the main part of the soap. In order to get the right concentrations, the right amount of water for my two different parts, I went on the soap calculator and input all my different oils, my lye amounts, and then input for the water 30% and 45%, hoping that this would result in two different shades of yellow as explained in our soap challenge this month. Here you can see what I was working with for my two different batches. In the bigger jug, I've already shown you the lye concentration, and here is the lye concentration for the smaller batch. As you can see, I have used really small batches. The main reason for this being that I'm based in the UK, and even if this soap turned out beautifully, I would not be able to sell it or even give away without having it legally assessed. So whenever I create a new soap, try out a new technique, or take part in a soap challenge, I always try and work with a smaller batch first to see what the end result will be. Here I am adding the lye to my bigger batch now, to the 3/4. I decided against using a stick blender this time round, and if you keep watching the video to the end, you will see why when I show you my first attempt at the Ghost Swirl. As I'm whisking, you can see how the colour is slowly changing to a slightly richer yellow, which actually worked out beautifully for me in the end. With this attempt, I really wanted to make sure that I don't go to medium or thick trace. I wanted to keep it really light trace to make sure that I had enough time to mix my smaller part with the smaller lye concentration and still manage to get a nice drop swirl. You can see I keep stirring it in now. I am not using a stick blender, and I keep checking whether it might be just about right. And at this point here, I'm thinking this is a really good trace to be working with. It is very thin, very runny. Oops, there was a little hiccup there. But it worked fine for me at that point. I was quite happy with the consistency at this stage. As you can see, you might spot it on the video already, it really quite quickly got a little bit thicker. So I decided now is the time to really work fast on that smaller part of my soap. I'm stirring in furiously here, trying to mix as quickly as possible whilst checking whether my bigger batch is still runny enough to be able to do that drop swirl, and decided now is the time to really pour that in from quite a height to make sure it goes all the way down. You can see it goes down nicely, and I was expecting there to be a few really nice drop swirls. Some of it accumulated on the top, but that was fine. My biggest concern at this point was whether that smaller part of the soap was mixed properly, or whether the lye was not incorporated well just yet, but only time will tell on that side. Now, I had some left over from my bigger batch, and I decided to just put a little bit of a design on the top, and as you can see, it didn't quite work out the way I planned. It doesn't look that fancy, so I changed my mind on that front. I left the lighter yellow, as you can see now it looks lighter yellow. I left those lighter yellow dots on top because I thought it could create a nice mix of the two different yellows on the top, and then used the spoon to create a more beautiful design. And there we are. Now here is the finished soap still wet in the mold. Here is the mica from Soak Rochford and my lovely fragrance oil from JAS. It smelled absolutely lovely whilst I was making that soap. And here's the cut of my Ghost Swirl from the Soap Challenge Club this October. I didn't expect there to be nice drop swirls right at the beginning of this soap, but I did expect them to appear towards the center of the soap, and they really did show up, and I was really quite pleased with the results. Here you can see the beginning of some of those nice differences due to the different water content, the 30% and the 45% that I used. And here we have some pretty decent drop swirls. Now, in an ideal world, they would have been slightly more thinner, there would have been more of them, and there would have been a much better play between the two different water concentrations. But for this, I would have needed a thinner trace, and with the new challenge, this was just not quite what I got to in the end. But nonetheless, I thought these looked actually pretty beautiful, and I got some really nice designs, as you can see here. You can also see some darker yellow dots on the top. These were, if you remember from the design, I initially attempted at the top, and I think actually they added beautifully to the finished product. And here it is, the submission for this month's Ghost Swirl. Now let me tell you a little bit about my first attempt of this month's soap challenge. It was such a big learning curve, and I took away so much from this. The soap ended up looking nice, but it was nothing that I had planned. So I started off in the same way. I have my melted oils. I made sure they're at the right temperature, around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And here I am adding my red mica and my fragrance oil. I had specifically chosen red as I'd hoped that with the different water concentrations, I would end up with some really beautiful dark reds and light red colors in my finished soap product. My fragrance oil was Peony from JAS as well. I have to say it's not my favorite, and I personally will not use it again, but that's a personal preference. Here you can see the beautiful red mica in the oil mix. Remember, there is no lye in it at this point. Here are the ingredients I'm using and the user rates. And I am, as with my finished product, dividing my batch into 3/4 and 1/4 to create a drop swirl. Here are the concentrations on the bigger batch. And here are the two different sized portions. The bigger one, 3/4 for the big base, and on the right, the smaller part for the drop swirl. I'm adding the lye concentration to my bigger batch, and I'm stirring it. At this point, I'm still feeling very confident that this is all going very much to plan. In fact, I'm feeling so confident that I decided to use the stick blender here, which was probably my biggest mistake. I had read from other soap makers how their soap had turned into soap on stick by stick blending, but as you can see here, I'm so confident I'm actually giving it a second go, and actually my batch still looks pretty fine at this point. This mix looks beautiful. It's nice and runny. It's probably a medium trace, and actually if it stayed that way, it would have worked really, really well. Now here's my small batch. And again, as I mentioned before, because I cannot sell or even give away for free any of these batches that I have not assessed, I do try and make small batches, and I have done the same here, but I believe that this particular batch actually was so small that it probably really didn't help any of my processes. Now, don't ask me what made me think that using a stick blender in this little batch was a good idea. I believe I thought that I needed to speed things up a little bit to make sure that both my batches were still runny enough for the drop swirl, but in this jug there just wasn't enough mixture in to stick blend properly. And also you will see what happened in a second due to this. As you can see, just about, the big batch has by now become absolutely solid. This is what you call soap on a stick, I believe. I have no other option than trying to do the best I can. This is absolutely not what I had in mind. It was not supposed to plop in one massive plop. It was supposed to be a nice, liquidy, runny mixture where I would be able to do some lovely drop swirls into it. Now, just looking at the video, you can probably sense a slight panic at this point here when I realized that actually anything I'd planned for this soap challenge really was not going to happen. And the only thing I could do now is save something and create something. So this smaller batch by this point really was quite a solid lump, as you can see. I decided that the only thing I could really do with this is just try and do something and mix it up somehow. After all, I was still using 2 different water concentrations, meaning this should result in 2 different colors. So I literally went for it. It doesn't look massively beautiful, but I decided I'm just going to mix them up and just see what comes up. It's kind of swirling, not the swirling in the traditional sense, and absolutely not what I had planned. But I thought, literally, I have nothing to lose. I'm just going to give it a go and just mix them up. This goes to show though, do not use a stick blender when experimenting on such a level. But having said it all, look at this beautiful soap at the end. Not what I'd planned, but still nice. If you want to see what else I get up to, why not check out one of my other videos. I'm going to update them regularly. I'm going to add bath bombs and soap experiments that I'm doing. Or find me on Instagram, sokind_UK. Thanks for watching.